How are our country's best sheriffs doing? Of all 50 states, we're #1. We appreciate what you guys are doing, and I think you're going to end up at this conference next year, potentially be talking about, hey, they elected some anti-law enforcement mayor in New York City, and now all these NYPD cops want to come work in our agencies and get the $5,000 bonus. And I think that that's unfortunately something from New York's perspective that may happen if they do this. And it's kind of frustrating to see it because we know what works and what doesn't work. Some of this stuff has been tried where you're anti-law enforcement, releasing criminals, not pursuing prosecutions, and then we see states like Florida that have done it the opposite and have had really strong positive results. So we've been able to do a lot of stuff holistically. I always talk about we're ranked #1 in economy 3 years in a row by CNBC of all 50 states. We've led the nation in net migration for at least the last 3 or 4 years. We're #1 in education freedom, #1 in higher education, #1 in business formations, #1 in talent development, entrepreneurship, all these things. And there's a lot of great things to talk about, but I will tell you, none of that stuff would be sustainable if you don't have law and order prevail in your communities and in your state. And we've seen that across the country. Yes, they've had a lot of problems in other areas too in some of these places, but the #1 reason why people fly the coop from some of these places is because law and order is broken down. They don't feel safe in their communities. The politicians, for whatever reason, have let inmates run the asylum. What we've done in Florida is we've done strong policy and we've done strong support for the people that are out there getting the job done. At the end of the day, you can have the right policy if you don't have folks in our sheriff's departments and in our police departments that are out there doing God's work, then you're not going to be successful. But you can have great sheriffs, great police departments if you have really bad policy that's empowering criminals and harming public safety, then you're fighting a really serious uphill battle. So if you look at what we've done throughout my tenure as governor, well, one thing we've done is we've rejected jailbreak-style policies that have prevailed in places like New York and California. And let's just be clear, those have been proposed in the state of Florida. And people think, oh, we're so law and order. There's a lot of folks that wanted to do that. You have people that want to release felons from prisons now, saying they don't even have to serve their sentence like Florida law requires. You also have folks that want to go easy on people that are committing street-level crimes, and we know that that would just cause more crime and a proliferation of a lot of bad things. There's movements to abolish cash bail. You even had a movement down in Miami-Dade where a judge wanted to do that. So this stuff has all been percolating around the country. They run into a roadblock with me as governor because I'm not going to support it, and we're going to make sure that we're law and order. But just think if those policies were to take hold in Florida, how much more difficult would your jobs be as sheriffs to be able to do it? I just think to myself, like in New York City, you have these cops, and they're risking their lives out there. You never know what's going to happen, and that's just against the backdrop. They know if there's any type of altercation, the politicians and the media will likely blame them, even if they didn't do anything wrong. So you kind of have that. So you're doing all this. You apprehend a criminal suspect. They end up getting charged, and a judge just lets them go, even for very serious crimes. So then like 2-3 weeks later, you get called out, and you got to apprehend the same guy for committing additional crimes. And it's like, at some point, whose side are you on with some of this stuff? So our policies have been strong. We nipped all the jailbreak legislation and proposals in the bud, and it never got traction in the state of Florida. We also responded to some of the trends we saw in other parts of the country, particularly on the heels of the BLM riots in 2020, in this movement to defund the police. This guy running for mayor in New York City, wants to defund the NYPD. He said that many, many times. And this is an asinine policy. We said it at the time, a lot of the media were hyping this. These politicians thought it was like somehow cool to do it. They had their social media campaigns and everything. The places that did that got catastrophically bad results as a result of doing that. In Florida, what we said is, you can run your city or your county, and look, most places in Florida this wouldn't be an issue. You can run it how you want, but we're not going to let some city council, cut off their nose to spite their face by defunding law enforcement. And so we actually enacted legislation preventing local governments from defunding police. Now, most of the places in Florida would not try to do that, particularly at the county level. But, it only takes, you have some city commission where there's five city commissioners. You can get 3 bozos to do stupid things sometimes. So why would we want to indulge that when we know the results are catastrophic? So we said, you're not going to be able to do it. We'll put money back in, and we'll keep it going. And then the other thing that happened on the heels of that, you had the streets being overrun with rioting and disorder around the country. Now, we said from day one when that was percolating, that ain't happening in Florida. We backed, obviously, our local law enforcement, our state law enforcement were out there to help whatever needed to be done. But we also knew this is a trend to go out. You see unrest across this country now very frequently, and it's whatever cause celeb somebody has. So we enacted the strongest anti-riot legislation in the country, and part of it is geared towards really coming down hard if these rioters are harming law enforcement, because they do target law enforcement. We also want to make sure they're not just caught and released immediately so they can keep going. So we had some good bail provisions in there. And then we made sure that individuals had a right to defend themselves. And particularly, if you have a swarm of these people that are like banging on your car, you have every right to just get out of Dodge as fast as you can, and you don't need to sit there and be like a sitting duck. So when they try to take over streets in Florida, it doesn't work out well for them. They end up getting held accountable. We get the streets clear. So they don't even try. And so it's funny, they were protesting something, maybe it was the immigration, and it's like they would tiptoe in the street, but as soon as that light changed, like you see the video of these guys getting out, because, we're just not going to tolerate the nonsense. And the more you tolerate it, the more it builds, and you get even more and more terrible results. So that's an example of we are squarely on the side of law-abiding, peaceful citizens, and we're not going to let inmates run the asylum. Another example of that is the legislation we provide to give our sheriffs more authority over these squatters that try to take over not just residential, but even commercial properties. And Florida did not have that to the extent that some of these places around the country did, but the reality is that you can just take, and we have a lot of seasonal residents, you just go move into somebody's house, and then all of a sudden, you can assert some type of property right. Obviously, that's insane, but if it's a 9-month process, then that's not adequate disincentive to do it. So we've now created enhanced authority to be able to remove squatters from these properties. We've also done a lot on targeting animal cruelty, and we just signed legislation to create a registry for people that are convicted of cruelty to animals, because I think it's just something that, you have a neighbor that's abusing a dog or something, that's a huge, huge problem. And I know a lot of people would be very concerned about that and would certainly want to know that. But we've also paired that with unprecedented support for our police canines. Huge support for veterinary, huge support so that the handlers are able to adopt when the canines are retired, enhanced emergency response services for injured canines who are in the line of duty. And I can tell you, I really learned the value of canines when I was in the military, places like Iraq. You see what these guys do. It's amazing. But I know they've been huge instrumental parts of all of our law enforcement agencies here in Florida. And so there's never been another state that's done more to support both animals writ large, but also supporting our police canines. And then we've been as strong as any state in the country on child sexual abuse, including enacting the death penalty for pedophiles. Now, there was a ruling from the Supreme Court 20 years ago saying that somehow you could not do death penalty if it's short of a murder. Now, that was not what the Founding Fathers ever thought. No one really asserted that for 200 years. Then all of a sudden, the court, on a 5-4 decision, just said, no, you can't do it. Well, I'll tell you, you look at some of these people, how sadistic they are, serially raping these very young children. I think the only appropriate punishment is the ultimate punishment. I also know that even if you sentence them to prison, they will offend in prison, and if they ever get out, they will definitely reoffend once they get out. So we now have, I know there's a case or two where they're doing this. There's going to be litigation on it. We know that. Like sometimes I'll have some reporters say, well, the Supreme Court ruled you can't do that. No, we're testing that. We don't think it's a valid decision. We're putting it up there. We have a new, different court, different members. They can reevaluate it, and I think ultimately restore the Constitution's true meaning to say, yes, states have the option. Juries can consider the evidence. A jury may not want to authorize a capital punishment in every state. That's fine. That's how our system works. But it absolutely should be something that people can do, and I don't think that we're doing as much for the victims as we could be unless we're willing to do the ultimate punishment. So, and we've done other policies, but I don't think you're going to find a state that's been stronger on policy to help you do your jobs and do your jobs well than the free state of Florida. Now, it's one thing to really to sabotage law enforcement like some of these crazy states have done, but I would say a lot of states are just kind of, they sit on their hands. They're not doing bad things, but they're not really leading and getting out there like Florida's done. And so on issue after issue, we've led the way and we'll continue to do that. And we've coupled that by, yes, strong policy, which is action speaking louder than words, but we've also shown support for our law enforcement communities by putting our money where our mouth is. And not that funding and everything is the whole 9 yards, and there are probably some agencies around this country that get a lot of money and don't produce results. I know that's true in other spheres other than law enforcement. But when we've had opportunities to do things to make a difference, we've stepped up. So a couple years ago, we enacted the $5,000 bonus for the new recruits. And so that's used for young people who are joining for the first time, which we thought that was important to include because as people have been negative on law enforcement for recent history, I think it's getting a little bit better. But there was a time period where it was really, really difficult in media and stuff, the way they would portray this. And young people, we didn't want them to get this impression. So we wanted to know it's a meaningful career, it's a noble cause. And then, of course, the transfers from other states, when they come in, they're able to get a $5,000 bonus. And I think that, almost every one of your agencies has probably done both the new recruits as well as the out-of-state transfers in. Like I said, I do think you're going to see strong interest in New York City if this election goes the way that some people are predicting. I don't know about you, but would you want to put on a uniform and go out and serve if the mayor doesn't even think your agency should exist or get any funding at all, doesn't think police should go into dangerous areas, that they should send social workers into there? That ain't my cup of tea, and I don't think anybody who wears the uniform thinks those policies will succeed. We also have done the Law Enforcement Academy scholarships. We have a program in Florida. It's great. I'm a big supporter for higher education, Bright Future scholarships. So in the state of Florida, first of all, we have the lowest tuition in the country. In-state tuition's about $6,300, which is the same as it's been for many, many years. And there's no better value in the country than the state of Florida's in-state tuition. You can get Bright Futures, and a lot of people who are good enough to get into University of Florida, some of these places, they're good enough to qualify for Bright Futures, so they may pay no tuition, or they have 75% off tuition. And that's great, and that's been really good for a lot of students. But we do have some, and even though we're working to kind of reform higher ed, get rid of the fluff and everything like that, you have had over the years people get those scholarships and then take, some subject that's not necessarily lighting the world on fire when they get out. So we said, well, wait a minute, if you're going to do higher ed, why not do something similar for the academy? And so that's been something that's been really supportive. It shows our support, and we're proud of that. And we want people to know it's a noble cause. And that's why We've done more in the high schools so that the students will be able to learn from the perspective of folks who are both working for sheriff's departments and police departments. Some of these kids may have stigmas about law enforcement, and then when they get in and they see that people are very dedicated, they're working hard, it does change their viewpoint, and it really broadens their horizons. And I do think some of these kids will gravitate to wanting to serve in law enforcement. You know, it's interesting with these kids. I mean, my kids are younger, so we got a rising third grader, second grader, rising kindergartner. But like when you take them to things and they experience it, you know, they become so much more interested in doing it, rather than me just telling you, oh, this is the way it is, this is the way it is. No, when you get to go see for yourself, people really get energized and they want to be able to do it. So I'm proud that we've been able to do that. And we've also done salary increases for our state law enforcement. So for our seasoned veterans, they're getting a 15% increase on top of the overall increase that they did for all state employees this year. And you look at some of our guys, like our highway patrol, they were at the southern border under Biden to help with the border invasion. They've been on the front lines of the illegal immigration operations. Obviously, they deal with a lot of people violating our laws on the roadways. So this was the least that can be done. But, you know, just like I said on that policy, there were folks that wanted to really have more California-style policies in Florida. I had to fight to continue the bonus. I don't think there's a single sheriff in this state that doesn't think our $5,000 bonus program has been valuable. I haven't had anyone tell me to get rid of it. I think a lot of people want to see it continue. And it's not just for sheriff's departments, it's police departments and state agencies. I know that at the state law enforcement, everyone was supportive of these law enforcement pay increases. But, you know, initially, the Florida House of Representatives defunded our law enforcement bonus program that you guys have all used. They defunded any increase for state law enforcement, and in fact, they even defunded key aspects of the Florida Highway Patrol. Now, I work with the Florida Senate. You know, we landed the plane and we got it done, but you have to ask yourself, why would you be try to defund something that has clearly worked, that has had universal support from the people that are actually on the ground doing this? Why would you deny pay increases to people who are clearly underpaid? We need to, just for recruiting and retention purposes, we need to do it, but we also need to do it, say, job well done. To say, you know what, you were out there going above and beyond what you signed up for when you went to the southern border, or when you're out there helping enforce laws against illegal immigration. So how is it that we're even in that situation? So I just say, we're a law and order state. We've put our money where our mouth is. But what we were able to do, we had to fight tooth and nail to be able to deliver continued results for you. And I just think that it shouldn't have even come to that. Why wouldn't we all agree on saying that we're all on the team here and want to do it? So keep watching on some of this stuff, because I think that there's the difference in rhetoric and then actions. And anyone's going to come up here and say they're for law enforcement. What are your actions showing me? And if your actions are to try to cut out very successful initiatives, then that tells me all I need to know. Now, we've got some key issues that are percolating now, and our sheriffs have done more than any other sheriffs in the state and any other state, and maybe even all 49 states combined, when it comes to enforcing our laws against illegal immigration. And we called on both our state and local agencies to be on the team on this. And I understand it's not necessarily the core mission. Ideally, we would have a federal government that just takes care of this, right? And we wouldn't even have to, I mean, maybe you get someone in a jail and then you just turn them over. You don't have to worry about it. That would be ideal in terms of how I think this is supposed to work. But we're coming off a period, particularly the last 4 years, where we had massive infusion across the southern border. We've had persistent problems for many, many decades. And it was the fact that if you're going to reassert the sovereignty of the country, if you're going to restore the rule of law, and if you're going to make sure that illegal immigration is in fact illegal, you weren't going to be able to do that with just DHS resources alone, particularly at the start of the Trump administration, after 4 years of the agency really wilting, particularly interior enforcement. So we did legislation. Everyone's got to be on board. You got to do best efforts to help assist with that. We now have these 287G agreements, which are task force model, where we're going in and I think, Grady Judd was, when we did our update the other day, he pointed out, we're apprehending faster than DHS can hold and process. And so the results in Florida and the efforts in Florida have been so far above and beyond any other state in the country. And it's really, we're pointed to as the model for what DHS wants to see all around the United States of America. And so that was part of the reason why under my leadership with the Division of Emergency Management, we set up this processing site at the Dade Collier Airport in the Everglades to be able to have a place where illegals could go, get them processed, and then literally there's a runway and they can be flown out immediately. And it's interesting because, you hear this different stuff. The people that are going to the Alligator Alcatraz are illegally in the country. They've all already been given a final order of removal. So people talk about due process, this and that. And obviously, there's some process. I mean, if you do have a right to be here, then that should matter. There should be some way to ensure that you are here illegally before they send you, for sure. But these guys have already gone through that. So they have that. So if you have an order to be removed, what is the possible objection to the federal government enforcing that removal order? Now, I know under Biden, all that was just a suggestion, right? You come across the border, they give you a notice to appear 3 years into the future. Not much of a deterrent when you do that. And if you did have a final order of removal, they were not sending ICE or DHS, after folks. But that's what you're dealing with here. And so if you don't believe that someone under a final, and we have probably 50 to 80,000 just in the state of Florida that already are under the final orders of removal. They've gone through, and that's what's happened. So if you don't think those folks should be sent back, then you basically just want an open border. If you're going to say that having been ordered to be removed through the process we have, that shouldn't amount to anything, I would ask, well, then why would a U.S. citizen have to follow an order to pay more taxes by the IRS? Why would a U.S. citizen have to follow orders that they don't like that are issued under federal law? It's almost like people want to give special privileges to people that are here illegally and that have already had this final order of removal. So those flights out of that airport have begun. We're monitoring the cadence of those. We do have the ability to increase capacity, and I'm willing to do that, not just there, but also at our site in Camp Blanding. But what I want is, obviously I hope DHS just, right sizes and can take it. But until then, what I want to be, it's not our responsibility to just hold people indefinitely. Our job is to help the processing and deportation. So these should be short-term. You go through whatever you need to go through to get the I's dotted and the T's crossed, and then they're on a plane, and then they're out. So they've deported over 100 from there, and they've had 300 or 400 more that have flown out of there and are either have been deported or are awaiting deporting from other places in the United States. It's just like, you guys know, it's like a hub and spoke, right? You have airlines that will feed into one place. Well, we may have 100 illegals that are ready to be sent, but they may be from 6 or 7 different countries. So they have places in like Louisiana where they can fly into, and then they basically segregate people based on the country that the next flights are going to, and they do it. So there's a process that DHS use it. That's not something we're involved with. That's their responsibility, and they're doing it. But I really believe if we can get a good cadence going, not only is that going to be beneficial for Florida, but I also think it's going to serve as a huge deterrent for people to want to come illegally in the first place, or people that may be here illegally violating the law will be able to maybe make a different decision. And we do offer, both the federal government and even us at Alligator Alcatraz, we offer an ability to simply fly home. You got to be escorted and got to ensure that you're doing it, but you can do that and you can short circuit any process that you have to go through if you want to do it. So this is something that's going to be able to increase numbers. We're ready to flex to expand to Blanding if we need to. I'm not going to do it unless the cadence is there, because I want to make sure that we're getting it done But Florida's been the leader in this, and I know the White House has called on other states to mimic what Florida's doing. I don't know, some states may not want to, some states may want to, but it's not necessarily easy to do. Sometimes people think things we do in Florida, oh yeah, you can rebuild the bridge in 3 days. Yeah, that's easy. You can do this, you can do that. No, and honestly, it takes a lot of ingenuity. It takes a lot of manpower. We've got a lot of great people that are working on this. You wouldn't have the strong task force presence without the sheriffs and a lot of our police chiefs. So we really appreciate it. I can tell you the people of the state appreciate the attention to this matter, because I think it's like we've been dealing with this for decades. Are we going to solve the problem, or are we not going to solve the problem? And if we can't solve it now, then when are we ever going to solve it? And the state of Florida has been leading the way on that. I also appreciate what the sheriffs have done to recognize you guys see more than anybody does in the communities, because you're going out, you can get called to one place, and then you see all this other stuff and that's happening, and you see some of the same behavioral patterns, you see some of the same social problems, and you see that, I think, in a way that's more real than what some bureaucrat sitting in an office in Tallahassee or Washington, D.C. could ever appreciate. And so, our insight in the state of Florida is, ultimately a lot of these social problems, cannot be solved by government bureaucracies. And the way to be able to help people who've fallen on hard times, who have mental health problems, who have drug abuse problems, who have a whole host of different problems, is not for government to be solution, but for government to link folks to great resources that are in our communities. And that includes our churches, that includes charities, that includes businesses that want to be supportive, even individual volunteers. And so Hope Florida has been the umbrella that has linked folks in need for this. And we've been able to get over 30,000 people off government dependence. I think it's like, 75, 80% of the folks that have been placed in employment have been able to get increased wages on this. And you've got moms with young kids. There's a whole host of things. But the more people have the resources throughout their communities and people that show interest in them, and they get on their feet, 2 feet, the much better it's going to be for them to be able to be successful. And that means less problems for law enforcement, and I think it means stronger communities. So having those liaisons in your office, I think, is going to pay big dividends. We're constantly doing more to be able to enlist more and more support from resources exterior to government. And then the final point I'll make, and I think that there is so much that we can't necessarily predict, but this rise of artificial intelligence is going to have huge implications for our society. Now, I'm not one who thinks that we should just turn over our society to a handful of big tech companies. I think there needs to be guardrails. I think there needs to be some rules of the road. They actually passed a provision in the U.S. House of Representatives to eliminate the authority of states to touch AI for the next 10 years. I think that was a gross violation of the 10th Amendment. I don't think it was something that ultimately would have been good policy. The U.S. Senate killed that, so it didn't end up getting into law. And think about, we did the bill, we were in Jacksonville, I signed the bill about, they were using AI, taking a young woman's likeness and putting it in pornography. And it's like, people think it's real. And what does that do to somebody? So we put safeguards in. We put an ability for the victim to fight back. That would have been illegal for us to do, had that provision passed. So I think there's going to be a lot of things that come down the pike, but don't have any illusions. People are going to use AI to scam, to cheat, to steal, to harm people. And I think we're going to have to come to grips. We're going to be working on a policy for Florida, and it may require some legislation to be able to provide adequate protections for folks. But you're going to have potentially a lot of upheavals just in the job market. You have folks that graduate college, they go in for more entry-level stuff. Maybe it's more kind of grunt work. AI is replacing some of those jobs. So what's that going to do to the job market? And interestingly, we were told for so many years, well, you got to learn to code, you know, some of these jobs, it may end up being the opposite. And we've really stressed in Florida vocational education, acquiring skills to be skilled labor, because that is really, really necessary. And, you know, manufacturing, you know, we've added, I think 50, 60,000 manufacturing jobs since I've been governor. We've added manufacturing businesses. But, you know, one of the impediments to further growth is they need more trained, skilled workers to be in these jobs. So I think those jobs, but when you have some of these more white-collar, kind of low-level, you know, it may be that those are the jobs that are going to be on the chopping block first, and that's just going to create a lot of issues. So we're thinking very deeply about it. I think it's going so quickly that sometimes it's hard to keep up. But I will tell you, AI is incredibly flawed as well. It does spit out nonsense, because what this is doing, it's like a supercomputer that scans all these data sets and then gives you an answer. Well, if the data sets are garbage, it's garbage in, garbage out. And so when they're spewing some of the stuff that's totally wrong, it's not that the computer messed up per se, it's just that the underlying data was wrong. And so the result ends up being incorrect. So who is controlling the data sets? Who's controlling the You think some people may have an agenda behind that at some point? Yeah, you can bet your bottom dollar they would. That's human nature. So how are you able to make sure that technology in our society enhances the human experience but doesn't supplant the human experience? There's an old saying, I think, therefore I am. It's like kind of like the core of humanity is to be able to think for yourself. And what AI is proposing is to relieve us humans of the ability to even do that. You know, kids growing up, are they going to even have to write a paper, or can they just plug something into AI? What are you going to do on, you know, anytime you need something? Do you actually read for yourself, or do you just jump it in? So it's going to create a lot of huge implications for our society. I do think that there are some that just say, you know what, we just need to turn it over to the tech overlords and pray for the best. That is not going to happen in Florida. That can't happen in Florida. I don't think it would work to do that in the state of Florida. But it is going to create major, major issues for our law enforcement, because there's going to be so many ways where this can be used in ways that are very harmful to people. And look, you know, I try to be honest about this stuff. Like, you look at some of the things like social media, technology, there's obviously good to it, but there's also a lot of bad to it. And you gotta look at that, and you gotta be honest about it. Now, we've done some stuff to try to help parents with their kids on social media, and there's other things that we're looking at doing there too, but you can't look at AI and say, oh, this is gonna be a boon and that there's no drawbacks. There are huge, huge ramifications, huge potential negative implications, and some major, major drawbacks in terms of how we operate as a society. And at the end of the day, how I conceive of my job is I just go back to why the country was founded. We're endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so government's role is to protect the rights that we already possess and to provide for every American, but in our case, Floridian, an open field and fair chance for their talents to flourish and for them to realize their dreams. And anything that helps that is something that I'm going to embrace. If there's things that are contrary to that, then I'm going to be in my position fighting to make sure that folks are still able to realize the dream here in the state of Florida. So there's going to be other issues other than that, but I do think that's a big one, and we have an open door. As you guys see different things that are happening with AI and some of the other technological innovations, if you have any type of advice on how to approach it from a state level, we're all ears, because this is going to be a really important issue that we're going to tackle in the ensuing months. But until then, keep up the great work. We're very, very fortunate to have a great cadre of sheriffs. We're very fortunate that you're upholding the culture of Florida to be a law and order state. As much as it's important to have policy and the financial support, and you make your job more difficult if you didn't have it, you can have the best policy if you don't have folks that are hard chargers, that are putting themselves on the line to be able to support their fellow residents and their communities, then it ain't going to amount to very much. So you guys have stepped up, you guys have answered the call, and our 50-year low crime rate is a testament to that. And I know, unlike some states, I know the people of Florida are genuinely appreciative for your service and for your sacrifice, and I'm one of them. God bless you all. Thank you. Oh, nice. That's awesome. Thank you.